in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsman Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, the great outdoors with Jason White.
Good morning to our radio audience. My name is Darrell Becker. I want to thank Jason for allowing us this time to talk about issues relative to agriculture. I am the president of the Fayette County Farm Bureau and also the chairman of the county's Land Preservation Board. And I will tell you that Jason also sits on our Pennsylvania Fish and Wildlife thing. So him and I, along with several others, have been working diligently for the last almost year. Once we found out that we're having this extreme problem with deer crop damage and so on and so forth. So we went to our state convention and we were very successful in passing a bunch of resolutions relating to this to try to help farmers who are struggling to survive. And this is kind of like the primer for what the Farm Bureau does. We took the problem that we had. We went to our annual meeting from the county, passed some resolutions, passed them up to the state. The state took it to the delegate floor at our convention in November, and we were successful from Fayette County in getting about 8 of these resolutions passed. We can delve into them later. But here's how the Farm Bureau works. This is like the first week in November, and I was just told yesterday that Senators Elder Vogel and Rothman are getting ready to introduce some legislation that pretty much relates to everything that we brought up at the state convention. So, you know, we advocate, we try to push for legislation to help solve the problem. So I'm excited today. We have 2 local farmers that are going to be joining me. One is Rich Bird. He's a local farmer growing corn and soybeans. He's a Penn State graduate, a master farmer, and he's just completed his 51st Harvest, yes. And we also have Joel Malwicki, and Joel is a 4th-generation farmer from Mount Pleasant who operates a 200-acre produce and beef operation with his uncle, Kurt Keenan. So without any further ado, whoever wants to jump in first, we have 45 minutes of illumination about what farmers have to put up with in spite of fuel costs, fertilizer costs. Now we have to add the deer to the problem, and it can be very exasperating. So, gentlemen.
You go ahead first.
Well, we're having something happen in crop production that has really exploded in the last 2 years, and that is the amount of deer damage that is being done to our crops. We've always had some deer losses on our crops, and normally we can live with a little bit, and most farmers like to see a few deer. But last year, the damage to my corn crop was unbelievable, and this year, the damage to soybeans here in Fayette County and in Greene County was just something almost unbearable. We have on our harvesting machine a yield monitor that tells us what's going on, how much crop we're getting. And this year, most of our soybeans, when we got into an area that the deer hadn't bothered, we were getting in the mid-50s bushels per acre, and really wonderful yields. But in the end, when we averaged everything out and across all the acres that I farm, plus some neighbors that bring crops, soybeans in and store at my place, the yields were no ways near that. They're very close to half of what we saw in the good areas the deer had eaten. And when we look at the dollar damage for these 5 or 6 or 7 farms that store at my place, we're looking at over $300,000 worth of beans that the deer ate. So if you can imagine, if you had to give up half of your paycheck every week to feed deer, you'll get a little idea of what we're going through right now. And that doesn't count the corn damage. And then there's damage to gardens and shrubs, and that they eat everything you can imagine. 50 years ago, we rarely saw deer or turkey. Now there's so many deer around that you can't begin to count them all. I have friends that have told me they've seen 100 deer in some fields at night, and the population has just exploded.
I agree with you, Richard. I run a small produce operation compared to some. We farm about 94 acres of produce just out of Mount Pleasant. And, you know, while I was an avid hunter and like to see some deer every once in a while on the farm, I often hear my uncle, which he's 70 years old now, tell me that he was so excited to get his first deer that he had went out, and him and my grandmother had went out, and he had hunted for deer for a couple of years until he got his first doe. And now it's a common occurrence. My 8-year-old, 5-year-old, and 3-year-old ride with me in the Gator, and they're always constantly pointing out deer. My kids can see deer in the family car before anybody else can. But anyhow, with that being said, I can add to that a little bit. We go to some special we go to some special means of growing an early crop of sweet corn. And so what ends up happening with that early crop of sweet corn, it costs quite a bit extra money to plant. We plant it into plastic, and then we cover it with an expensive row cover that's made out of a paper material. And the deer just absolutely punch holes in it. And the idea with the cover is to hold the heat in to get that corn to come on sooner. But what ends up happening when that corn comes on sooner, it's providing a feeding area for the deer before there's anything else growing out of the ground. So we do see a fair amount of damage in our early sweet corn that we plant for 4th of July, and we depend on that because that is the first money that we see of the season. Also, I grow a lot of green beans, and green beans are in the same family as alfalfa. And before we came on the air, we were talking a little bit about, Rich was talking a little bit about the fact that if you want to grow a really good crop of soybeans, you just plant some alfalfa beside it and they'll destroy the alfalfa. Well, we plant green beans and they just absolutely annihilate and destroy. The other thing that's going on I'm in Westmoreland County, but the other thing that's going on is I'm one of the few young farmers left in Pennsylvania, I think. There's only a handful of us. I'll be 40 next week. And my grandparents and my uncle have always encouraged me to become a farmer. I was very lucky to be born where I was born, to be raised on the farm. And we were dairy farmers before we got into produce. And, you know, even when we were dairy farming, we were very proud of our corn yields and our hay yields. And I can still see pictures of my grandfather up in the field with a yardstick showing that he had 36-inch tall alfalfa that he was really proud of. And anymore, you're not going to get that because the deer come in and they mow it off as fast as it comes up. We do have an extreme problem with deer, and I believe that hunting may be one of the contributors to it. I don't think you see as many people, young people hunting. They're just
true.
Go ahead, Daryl.
No, that's very true. That's very true. I can tell you one of the things that's hard to explain is that the deer, you know, in rural Fayette County, there's deer all over the place. I just came back from a hunting trip in Tionesta up in the big woods in the Allegheny Forest, and I was there for 2 days, and I saw 2 deer. I came back, I got off of 43 right next to my house, and in a mile and a half it took for me to get from 43 to my house, I saw 14 deer. So, you know, it's location. So where are the deer going to go? They're going to go where the food is, and they go to farms.
And so my argument with this whole deal is, while I know that the Pennsylvania Game Commission pushed for, you know, these antler restrictions and trying to help the deer population and deer herd, that's all well and good. The problem is when you get overpopulation, you're going to see a lot of diseases arise and things that are going to eventually, it might come around that it wipes the deer out. And by a farm standing point, I'm not really going to be that saddened by it. But with that being said, I do still like to see some deer. I don't dislike all the wildlife. I mean, that's part of nature. The problem is, as the farms dwindle in Pennsylvania, you're going to see more and more damage on the farms that actually raise a good crop. What I've noticed is out through like the Scottdale area and there where they have clusters of farms, where there might be 7 or 10 farms in one bunch, there's not a lot of underbrush or outlying areas. you'll see a lot less damage in that area, because they're sharing the damage. Now, where I'm at, there's only a handful of farms around me, and there's a lot of brush and a lot of underbrush and a lot of people that post their property, which I understand. They don't want certain people on their property. I understand that. That's entirely up to their choice. But what ends up happening is the deer damage that I get on my farm comes off of fields that are full of brush and all this other stuff and woods and things of the surrounding areas, and they only show up at my place at nighttime. So everybody asks, can I go hunting? Can I go hunting? You know, the truth is there's probably only 5 to 7 spots to hunt deer on our place. And the truth is the deer come in the wee hours of the morning, and that's when they're in there destroying and tearing up the crops. So when I joined the Fayette County Farm Bureau down here, what I talked to Daryl about was I want to put a deer fence up around the perimeter of our farm. Now, it's going to cost a small fortune to go ahead and put a deer fence around this area of ground, and I'm probably only going to do it in like 4 sections around a 200-acre farm. I cannot fence the township road, so it will not be 100% foolproof. But what I need people to realize is when you're a consumer and you come into, I run a small farmer's market called JP's Farmer's Market on 819, and when you come into my store and you buy products from us, 9 times out of 10, the reason the price might be what it is because, number one, fuel is expensive. Number two, taxes are expensive. I mean, you can add to the list, but when you have a crop out there and 55 or even 40% of it's left, not what we actually harvest, but that's what's left after the deer destroy it.
And this is after you've already paid for the seed, planted the seed, used your fuel to plant the seed, and you hope to realize at least to break even. And in some cases, you're not even breaking even. And let's go back to several months ago when I started with Jason trying to accumulate data, because there is no data. There's no data that says this, that, or the next thing. And it's amazing the amount of money that people, without embellishing, have lost, farmers, in the process of planting and then getting to harvest. It's just incredible. So I have a little piece here from the state that talks about, according to the most recent survey on wildlife crop damage conducted by the USDA, crop and livestock losses from wildlife in the United States totaled $944 million. Guess what year that was? 2001. Okay, so we're talking like 20-some years later, and it was almost $1 billion in 2001. This is an astronomical amount of money that's being lost because we don't manage the deer herd, okay? So we need to get back to trying to manage the deer herd. I will tell you, I don't believe the Game Commission knows how many deer there are. I don't believe they know how many deer are harvested every year. You know, you have doe tags that are given, and you may have 5,000 or 6,000 doe tags. And I'm telling you, there are hunters who buy doe tags so that other hunters can't shoot doe. So, you know, and they're not farming. So at some point in time, you've got to say, who are we protecting? Are we protecting the deer, or are we trying to protect the farmers?
And I can add to one more thing, and then I'll let Rich add what he wants to add too. I can see he wants to add. But I also purchased an apple orchard here in the last year, and we also have a small peach orchard there on the farm. And what's really aggravating, I don't mind planting a crop like sweet corn or green beans or tomatoes, and a few of them getting ruined, and I understand that's going to happen. We don't live in a perfect world. But when you plant a tree and you wait 5 years for it to produce a fruit. I had beautiful peaches on my trees this year. I went to a lot of extra work to get peaches on my trees. And I go up there in the fall and I'm starting to clean up some brush and stuff around underneath the trees and clean the weeds back. And I find out that the deer that have been trying to get rid of their velvet are down in there scraping on these trees. And so the problem is, it's not just the fact that you lost the tree and the little bit of money that came from purchasing the tree. It's the fact that you spent 5 years waiting on that tree. It's not something that you plant and get a quick return on. So with that being said, the other thing I'll tell you is, if I fence my farm off at home there, me and my uncle fence the farm off, and we live next to US 819, I'm going to tell you that there is going to be a lot of deer being hit by cars and other things of that nature, because they're still going to be coming to look for the feed. And I realize that the deer are everybody's. The deer are basically owned by everybody. The Game Commission says the deer are owned by everybody. but they're being fed on the farmer's dollar. And it's very, very frustrating because while people say, well, yeah, you got a beautiful farm and you got lots of equipment and you can do this and you can do that. That is true. But what I'm telling you is that we take a humongous risk in the spring when we go out and we plant what we plant. A lot of times people don't realize that we plant maybe what they paid for their house. We plant in a couple of fields, and then we hope that we're going to get a small return on a large investment. That is agriculture to a T, basically.
Yeah, agricultural economics teaches us early on this is not the business to be in to get independently wealthy in a quick time frame. 2 to 3% return on investment is about average, and you have to be at this game for a long, long time to really be prosperous. Hopefully it's multi-generational. But when you have problems like the deer have become in the last few years, it's really going to discourage children from taking over the family farm, from ever having any sort of career in agriculture. We had mentioned about people getting doe tags so that other people can't kill does. Well, this is really coming back to haunt us now. Every doe you kill is 3 deer. It's the doe plus the twins that she's going to have in the spring.
Which is going to be 3 years from now eating all your crops.
Exactly right. So we need more hunters. We need to shoot more does. We need it to be less expensive for the hunters so that they can afford to go out and do everything that's necessary in order to hunt. There's way too much posted land, but once again, that gets into an issue of this is my place, I'll do what I want with it. So if you don't want someone hunting, that's your privilege. Personally, we allow everyone to hunt whatever is in season on our farm, whether it's deer or geese or small game, whatever. We encourage hunting, but right next to us is a huge woods full of trees that are marked with purple. Don't come on here to hunt. And that's where the deer live. They run over to my place, get their bellies full, and run back to get protected. How do you solve this problem?
Talk about the red tag. If you guys would talk a little bit about red tag and the Game Commission's response to this, how they want guys to come onto your farms and kill deer during the daytime when the weather's 70 degrees. Why don't you guys talk about that?
Yeah, we've been in the red tag program for a long, long time. And every year we apply, we get our tags, and you'll get people come hunt. Our normal harvest of deer is probably 2 or 3 because we don't have enough hunters. One year I think we had 9 because this one family came in, multi-generational, 3 different generations, 5 or 6 different hunters, and over the course of the season they did rather well, but they put in the time and the effort, and they were ones that liked to eat deer meat, and that was part of their diet. This year, I got my tags. So far in red tag, I'm looking at about 0. We've not had much success at all in the red tag program this year.
We've never signed up for the red tag, but I've pretty much heard the same story all along my whole life that the red tag was not real successful. My biggest thing is that, like I said, most of the deer that come onto our property is during the wee hours of the morning. They're not there during the daytime hours. I truly believe that some cost sharing and a fence or something would be a lot better. You know, I hear people all the time say that when they're buying their hunting license, my goodness, that's a lot of money to spend for a hunting license.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to give you just a little bit of my economics, but I'm gonna tell you what I think as far as I'm not a big deer meat eater myself. We raise Black Angus cattle, and I'm going to keep eating Black Angus over deer meat any day of the week. But with that being said, there are hunters out there that absolutely love it. What I've noticed is that 90% of your hunters out there that are good hunters are trophy hunters looking for the big rack, the big buck, which that's fine. That's entirely up to them. But when you shoot a buck, like them guys just said a little bit ago, you're killing one deer. When you kill a doe, you're killing 3 deer for next year. And with that being said, I think that you're never going to see the deer population go down until the deer actually get some of that chronic wasting disease, or where there's overpopulation. When I was a young kid, and I was probably 10 or so, we had quite a bit of red fox running on the farm there. And there was a time when I could remember my uncle or my grandfather shooting red fox every time they come around the barn, and we had chickens and stuff, and they were shooting red foxes. And then it got to where they got mange so bad that the red fox kind of died off. And so the only thing I'm telling you is to keep a healthy population of deer to the people that want to feed the deer. And we do sell stuff. We sell pumpkins, and people tell me, well, I'm putting them out for the deer. Well, that's wonderful. They've been eating pumpkins at my place all summer long, and we've been trying to keep them from eating them, so you buy the pumpkins. But with that being said, I'm not on here to dictate and tell you what needs to be done with the deer. I just want to educate and explain to people that they wouldn't like it if they went to a job, made $600 a week, and at the end of the week, your boss tells you, well, we're only going to give you $150 because something came out in the middle of the night and took the rest of your paycheck. And that's just really the way it goes. But what I'd like to see is if they're going to charge these big prices for these hunting license, then they need to dedicate some of this money to go back into cost sharing and fencing for some of the farmers that want to try to make a living, or they need to spread that out over the farmers that make a living. I make 100% of my living off the farm. That means I do not work away. I do not have a second job or a backup plan. I graduated high school, milked cows, and then we got into produce. And I've never had a backup plan. I've never worked away. I've never worked for anybody else. I've only worked for my family. And not too many people, I've been blessed to be able to say that I can do that, because not too many people in agriculture can say that they've worked at ag 100% without going to a job. So if I want my kids to be able to continue, we need to get things in check, because like these guys are saying, in the last 2 years, we've seen deer damage like I've never seen before. And I said to somebody this year, well, maybe it's because they found out where I was at with the vegetables,
Well, we've been fortunate enough to receive a phone call from Colorado from Mark Duda, who is one of the first people that contacted me that got us started on this thing. And Mark, welcome.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to chime in. If there's a few words you want me to say, I'll be glad to give you my point of view.
Why don't you tell us your story?
Well, in the history of our farms, I'll tell you regarding the deer damage, we've been growing vegetables for, I guess it's been around 50 years or so, but definitely strongly in the past 35 years, it's been nothing but vegetables. This last year and even the year before, it is by far the worst deer damage that I have ever seen on our farm. I mean, it's to the point, and I talked to Joel over there at JP's Market and Yarnix and other people, and everybody's seeing the same thing. But it's to the point where we're really concerned about the food supply in our region. I mean, it's really getting that bad. Even talking to some grain growers and other dairy farmers and stuff, like they're all telling me they're losing a lot of the outside edges of the fields because the deer are just taking it all. It's a serious issue that needs to be addressed, and if it doesn't get addressed soon, I'm really worried about the future.
Hey, Mark, Rich was talking about the Red Tag program. You want to give me your take on the Red Tag program and what the old story about if you do something over and over again and think something's going to change? That's the definition of lunacy. So anyway, tell me what you think.
So. I got to be honest, we were in the Red Tag program maybe like 10, 15 years ago, and it didn't work then. I guess it has changed now, and I've had a few conversations with the Game Commission, and I've applied for the new Red Tag. It hasn't gone any further. They were supposed to send me stuff in the mail, and they didn't. But anyway, the way it worked before, and it's not like this now, but the way it worked before is they would give you tags, you give tags to hunters, and then they're allowed to shoot a deer. And what we'd find out is if I get, let's just say I get 20 tags, and I get 20 tags out, 18 of those guys can go out 1 or 2 days, and then their tag's going to stay with them on their countertop, and they're not going to go back out. And then when I told that to the game commissioner, they're like, you know what, why don't you just keep the tags with you? When they shoot the deer, give them the tag. And, yeah, maybe we had a few more shots, but it isn't a solution. In my opinion, it's not a solution.
So what's the impact? What's the impact when you're seeing 67 deer in your soybean field at night and you kill 5 deer? What do you think that impact is?
Oh, it's a drop of water in a gallon. You know what I mean? It's just really not doing it.
So for the benefit of our audience, I will tell you, I have a video that Mark took where he walks up to within 10 feet of a doe in his soybean field, and he's talking on the video, and he says, "I wish I had a rock." And so he reaches over and he picks up a rock and he throws this rock and hits this doe right in the middle of her chest, and that doe ran 10 feet, turned around and looked at him. So this is what we're dealing with now. The Game Commission, let me just digress for 1 second. I'm going to read a couple of our resolutions. We recommend Game Commission utilize crop and livestock damage data from recognized sources when setting seasons and limits. Very important, seasons and limits. We recommend rigorous scientific study on the amount of yearly wildlife damage to crops and livestock in Pennsylvania, such as information from NASS, PDA, or Penn State and other industry-recognized institutions. We recommend farm operators be allowed to contact or appoint a delegated licensed hunters to harvest wildlife for crop damage without opening up to the public. And the other thing we're fighting for better trespass laws, so that if you want to allow people to come on your property, they have to have written permission. This is such a convoluted system that it's going to take a long time to fix it. But I'm going to go back to Rothman and I forgot his name already, but the legislation is going to be introduced. They're moving fast on this because they realize that there's a problem. I was coming to a radio station right here about a month ago, and I'm driving down 43, and I see all these police sirens and stuff like that. And here I drove past 2 bodies laying on the ground. There was a motorcycle, a dead deer in front of the 2 bodies, and then about 50 yards down there was a motorcycle that was like bent in half. The insurance companies claim that Pennsylvania is the worst state in the entire country for deer damage to vehicles. Folks, we got to do something. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to one of my friends of mine, and we were talking about how there's just not as many hunters as there used to be, and the hunters that are now, they're growing more for the trophy deer than trying to fill up their freezer.
Well, yeah, Mark, I agree with you. That's the big thing that I was talking about here a little bit earlier. Is I think that people have lost interest in hunting. I mean, you got diehard hunters out there that hunt, but it's too much worrying about the trophy rack. They watch too much of that stuff on TV and want to do videos and all that other stuff and make it all about videotaping the big buck. They're not worried about harvest. When I was a kid, probably 8, 9 years old, you could drive past. My farm's right up the backside of Youngwood Sportsman's, so they don't want the deer killed, and they got 1,300 acres down there. And when I was a kid, you drove down the road, you couldn't even get down past the road. There were so many trucks and cars pulled off. It was just full of orange hunters. You're not seeing that anymore. And part of that is that they take a 10 or 12-year-old boy, they take and they say, well, you're only allowed to hunt in this section, that section, because you're in 2C or you're in 4B or whatever. The kid does something wrong, and they want to make him a felon.
We have advocated from the Farm Bureau to do away with the game management units of 2A, 2B, 2C. It should be a county-wide issue so that you can basically get a population of the deer. You know how many doe tags you're giving out, and you have to require that people, it's already a requirement that you turn in the deer, but how simple would it be to put a QLR code on the license, and when you shoot a doe, you take a picture of that QLR license, and that automatically goes back to the state, and they're collecting data. There's no data. We issue doe tags, and you can't buy a doe tag right now, but I doubt that there's that many doe being killed.
Well, and I want to add one more animal of wildlife that's been a problem for us on the farm here. We've actually been seeing a lot of black bears at my place, and we ended up having a calf missing last year, and I had a rifle with me, and I saw a bear that had a tracking device on it. Now I know it's against the law to shoot that bear, but I'm going to tell you right now that if I see one carrying off a Black Angus cow, I'm going to be calling Daryl here to come out to the farm to represent me, because I'm going to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, another thing that we haven't touched on is if, in our county, in Greene County, the whole southwestern corner, we have a lot of folks that live in an economically challenged life. And if they go out and shoot a deer to eat because they're hungry, they are in big, big trouble if they get caught. Isn't there a way we could allow more deer to be harvested that way and not put people at risk of being hit with heavy fines or jail time or whatever the risk is?
Here's a novel idea. Why don't we let hunters shoot those, process the meat, and give it to food banks? I mean, there's people that are hungry, right? There's a lot of solutions to this, but, nothing, I'm not going to say nothing. I can't see anything that's working.
Well, and the other thing I'll add to that, Daryl, is that, by the time you figure out paying for a rifle, a hunting license, and deer, going out deer hunting, by the time you spend that kind of money, you might as well come up to my market and buy some Black Angus beef.
That was a good segue into marketing.
Well, but I'm just
That's
saying.
true, though.
I'm just saying.
yeah.
I mean, by the time you spend that kind of money, I mean, that's the big thing. A lot of these people that love to hunt, they either love it because it's their hobby, or they love it because their whole family survived generational on deer meat, and they love deer meat, and that's fine. That's not a problem. But the problem is getting people interested to keep going out and going hunting. I mean, I see it with the younger generation. They want to play on their iPhone. They want to play on their iPad. They're not interested in going out hunting with Pap.
Yep, it has changed over the years for sure.
How about a couple other novel ideas? We recommend that agricultural deer permits be available at no cost to eligible hunters and be distributed by the landowner. Okay. We recommend that the regular rifle whitetail season be extended 1 week. We actually had the gall to say that we ought to extend doe season and allow it go right through, extend it. And a negative stood up and said, the Game Commission is pretty smart. They don't want you shooting does at that time of the year because that's when they drop their fawns. And if you shoot the doe, the fawns are going to die. Well, I don't want to sound cruel and heartless, but go back to what we talked about earlier. Those two fawns, if they do survive, are going to be the ones who are eating the crops next year. They double in size in over a year. They can double in size. That's how fast the deer are populating.
Hey, Daryl, I got a question for you real quick. What is there any type of form of birth control that they can feed these doe that would eliminate, some of them actually breeding, or is there anything they could do to kind of cut down on the breeding of new populations?
That's another novel idea, but that's higher than my pay grade. I don't think that can. I don't know. That's an idea, but there are several and numerous ideas out there to try to manage the deer herd so that there's less damage done on farms. Well, it's never going to stop, but we got to get a handle on it.
Well, and I think, Mark will agree with me on this. What we're seeing from a vegetable producer standpoint is people don't realize that they love buying local produce, but I just don't think they understand that these deer can potentially put you out of business in 1 year.
Yeah, it used to be when we were harvesting crops as you're going along with your combine, the first 2, 3, 4 rows next to the woods, you had to worry about the trees being the ones that were doing the damage to the crops. So now we're 8, 10, 12, even 16 rows into the field because the deer are coming out of the woods and just decimating the outsides. And if they can find a nice path in to the cornfields, they will just follow that in and pick out an area and start eating. And we saw a fair amount of that this year. Areas where they found some plants that weren't doing real well, and they can walk through there because they can see. They get in the center of your field and say, well, we're home. We have our meal in front of us. We're going to have a good time this year. And this has really exploded in the last 2 years. I dread to
Absolutely.
see what 24 is going to be like.
I think it's really important to note that we're talking about rural deer around farms, and we're not talking about the Allegheny Forest where deer are eating mountain laurel and acorns. We're talking about, Fayette County and Washington County and Greene County and all of southwest Pennsylvania, where the deer are feasting on crops that are being planted by farmers. So for the deer hunters out there and the hunting advocates, we're not advocating you eliminate the deer. We're advocating that you keep them. And biologists will tell you that you have to have a healthy ratio between the bucks and the does. We don't have that. I mean, I counted 67 deer in a field right next in my neighbor's field, and the majority of them were does. People don't want to shoot those. Don't ask me why. But you know the reason why.
Yeah, but just to go on too about the crops and about however many rows they've been eating into the fields. We've had the past 2 years. We've had entire sweet corn fields entirely wiped out, like 4 to 5 acre fields, or bigger, where we got 0% harvest.
100% loss.
Well, for
100% loss.
For example, Mark, I bought corn off of you guys a couple times this year because I told you I had enough planted. I went out and I checked, and there's nothing there, So then Mark and I have had this discussion before, Daryl. People say, well, plant more then. Planting more is not the answer. It's just not the answer. I'm not going to – it's not up to the farmers to feed the deer population.
Well, there's a couple things I want to add here. Number one, I'll go back to when I first talked to Mark about this, and he said that there was a suggestion that he put up fence. Well, the answer to that is if I can't pay for the seed and the fuel and the fertilizer that I'm putting in the ground, how can I pay for a fence? Well, we're advocating that the federal government have a cost share where the farmer would pay 50% and the government would pay 50%. Pennsylvania, by the way, is one of the few states in the entire country that has no federal money coming into the state to help pay for crop damage from farmers. That's another thing we're working on. So if you want to,
if they pass that, you put me on the top of the list for it.
So people always say, well, what's the Farm Bureau doing for me? Well, if you eat, we're protecting the food chain. If you're a farmer, we're advocating that you be able to work hard and eke out a meager existence and a living so you can really enjoy. And farmers know what it's like to be on a farm. It's like being in heaven. You work hard, but it's just part of the program.
Yep. You spend your lifetime working in an industry with 2 to 3% return on investment. And it doesn't take long for Mother Nature, whether it's a drought, a disease, or four-legged deer that can come in at any time and really deal you a heavy, heavy blow, and sometimes those are fatal. And anyone that's worked on a farm or been a farmer and has had animals know that as a population increases, you run the risk of more disease, more problems, and at some point, this problem will resolve itself, that the deer population will crash. Now, hopefully we can survive till that comes, but it's really bad right now.
Yeah, and I second all that.
I agree 100%. And the one thing I've noticed the past 2 years that I haven't seen in the previous years is the deer eating crops that I've never seen them eat before.
I second that too.
I planted a late batch of zucchini. It was just like a half an acre, 100% lost. They wouldn't even let the plants get growing. They start to get growing. They'd eat the plants. They'd eat the leaf. They'd eat the flower.
How about the pictures of the cabbage that you had? They ate them all.
Well, they love cabbage, but how about this, Mark? I've seen them. We've seen them eating tomato plants, which tomatoes are a nightshade, which are actually a natural poison, the actual plant themselves, and they're eating the leaves off of them.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And even like pepper plants and a pumpkin crop. We lost our entire pumpkin crop this year. 40 acres of pumpkins.
Oh my.
Deer took them all. It's a mega loss. It's hard to survive that.
I had one farmer tell me that he had his jack-o'-lantern on the back porch, and a deer literally came up on his back porch and pulled the jack-o'-lantern out into the yard and ate half of it one night, and he waited for him the next night, and they came back to finish it off. So, they're going to go where they can get food. We know that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, they really like a pumpkin when it's right at blossom or right when it's setting the fruit. It's young and healthy.
And the other thing, Mark, is that I'll tell you real quick is that I'm going to say that when you're growing this stuff, the people that aren't complaining aren't paying attention. The farmers that are growing this stuff and not complaining are not paying attention to the losses they're taking.
Gentlemen, we got about 2 minutes left. Why don't each one of you guys do a little wrap up, and then I will say that anybody that's interested in progress can go to the Fayette County Farm Bureau Facebook page, and we try to keep people updated on that. So, Rich, Joel, Mark, speak up.
Well, I appreciate you having me on here today, and it's been a pleasure to talk with Rich and you too, Daryl, and Mark. I talk to you on the phone constantly, so that'll be me signing off.
Yeah, this has been a really interesting discussion. This problem has really ballooned in the last 2 years. And for those of us that grow grain, it's a challenge. Some of our crops don't even get to be 2 or 3 inches high before the deer come in and just mow them off, and they never produce a thing.
Mark?
All I want to say is I remember a few years back, Daryl approached me and said, if you ever need anything, let me know. And I approached Daryl here this past year, and I told him, I said, our biggest issue is deer. I said, this is the biggest issue we have right now. And Daryl, I just want to thank you for all that you've been doing. Thank you for getting this discussion going and everything you've done for us. And I wish nothing like the Bird Farm, Joel's Farm, all farms. I wish nothing but the best for everybody, and hopefully we could all work together to get this resolved.
That's our goal, and thank you, Mark. And by the way, have a safe trip home from Colorado. Thanks for calling in.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Once again, thank you. This is the Great Outdoors, Jason White Show, and I appreciate him allowing me to come on and do this little program here. And I hope it was illuminating to many people because farmers are really suffering. Thank you.
Angela's theme.